Good afternoon and welcome to the next instalment in the Security Middle East magazine webinars. My name is Dan Norman, Chair for the Security Middle East webinars, and today I'm joined by a triad of experts from Magnet Forensics, and they're going to be exploring a very hot topic in terms of security and wider risk management, and that's around using digital forensics in incident response. The team today is coming from a variety of places. We've got Chris Warden, VP of Sales from Waterloo in Canada. We've got Carl Tinker, Senior Director in Sales from Manchester in the UK, and Reese Tooby, Manager Solution Consultants in Cardiff, UK. So all three bringing a variety of experience to the webinar today, and I'm really excited to crack into it. One thing before we do begin, if anyone has any questions, please do fire them into the question pane. The team will be spending about 40 or so minutes on the presentation, and we'll aim to address the rest of the questions towards the end of the webinar. Without further ado, gents, I'll hand over to you guys to share your screen and then crack into the presentation. So over to you three.
Good afternoon to everybody. My name, as Daniel mentioned, is Chris Warden. I'm the Vice President of Sales for the EMEA team at Magnet Forensics. First off, I wanted to thank everybody for taking some time out of their day to join us on this webinar. I'm going to start off with a brief overview of the company, as I know some in attendance might not be very familiar with Magnet Forensics and what we do. And I do want to apologize in advance that I need to drop off after my part here, but I'm leaving you in very capable hands with Carl and Reese to finish out the webinar. So to start off with a little bit about us, we were founded in 2009 by a gentleman named Jad Saliba. The company back then was actually known as Jad Software. A few years later, we rebranded into Magnet Forensics. Jad founded the company when he was working as a digital forensic examiner at a local police force called Waterloo Regional Police Service. And he originally developed our first product, which was called Internet Evidence Finder, to address a bunch of different gaps that he was seeing in the tools that he was using on his casework. Our primary focus since then has been in the public safety community, but over the last 5 to 6 years, we've extended into the private sector, and we now apply our solutions to the growing set of problems that our customers are seeing there. Over the last 13 years, the company has grown from a handful of employees in a small accelerator center to a 500-person public company with a global footprint on many different continents of the world. Next slide, Reese. From a vision perspective, it's really quite simple. We strive to provide both public and private sector organizations with innovative tools to combat the crimes of today. And I'm a little bit biased because I've been at the company for almost all of those 13 years, but I do think we have been quite successful because the entire company, from Adam, our CEO, and Jad, all the way down to our co-op students, have all completely bought into our mission, vision, and purpose of Magnet. Next slide, Reese, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the industries that we serve, because there's two of them at Magnet. As I mentioned, we got our start in the public sector space, primarily selling to law enforcement and government customers. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about this because I know we're focused more on the private sector. So I will touch on that. And as I mentioned, over the last handful of years, while we've continued to service public sector, we've looked at how we can extend those solutions into the corporate space. And then there's two main customers that we serve in the private sector, and those are your traditional corporations, your Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies, as well as forensic service providers, those organizations who provide expertise in forensic services to customers that may not have the ability to do those cases on their own, either because they lack people or they lack the tools to do it. We are primarily working with people like incident response analysts, security analysts, people inside the organization that are doing threat hunting. And outside of that, those folks are servicing a number of different stakeholders from inside the organization. And that could be the HR team, it could be legal, it could be IT, of course, or the executive management team, depending on the type of case that they'd be working. And from a use case perspective, we're typically seeing things like HR misconduct, insider threats, could be employees also taking information outside of the company, whether that's key information, financials, or it could be customer information. And then more recently, a lot of malware, phishing, and ransomware. Next slide, please, Reese. So the challenges that both our public sector and private sector customers are facing are growing quite rapidly. I'll talk a little bit about the public safety side of things here, because I think a lot of the things that impact them are also starting to creep into the private sector. So it's not as black and white as it used to be about separate and different sets of challenges. Customers in general are overwhelmed with the volume of data that they see in cases, the complexity of that data, and also the velocity at which that data is growing and evolving. From studies that we've seen, it's estimated that nearly 85% of cases that are worked include some form of digital evidence, whether that's a traditional laptop or a computer, could be a smartphone or a tablet, could be wearable tech like a smartwatch, or even hard drives from things like cars and drones. Agencies and organizations just can't scale their human capital to keep up with this ever-growing amount of data. In fact, some of the studies we've seen are suggesting that these agencies and organizations are actually struggling to retain the forensic experts that they do have on staff. So what this leads to is, a number of cases that don't get investigated or don't get investigated properly. On the public safety side, it could mean that criminals are walking free or aren't facing justice. On the private sector side, it could mean that businesses face, a lot of damages depending on the type of intrusion that happens. So at Magnet, we believe that there is very much an urgent need for agencies and organizations to leverage technology in order to take control of this data tsunami, if you will, to get to the truth inside of that data, and then ultimately bring those cases to justice or to solve those cases. Specifically on the corporate side, cyber attacks are happening more and more frequently, with criminals looking to profit from gaining access to confidential information, whether that's related to customers or whether that's related to employees or financials of the organization that they're trying to attack. I think there's rarely a day that goes by where you don't hear of a company that's had a breach by malware or a phishing attack or a ransomware attack. And like the title of the webinar suggests, it's not a matter of if, but when an organization is going to face this type of hack. These insider threats also pose a risk with malicious employees, either committing fraud or stealing intellectual property. So we advise all of our corporate customers that they need to have a digital forensic solution to investigate these types of internal and external threats quickly and ultimately improve their security posture for the future. Next slide, please, Reese. So if you look at how we do that, there's a number of products that we offer, but I didn't want to get into going through all of those today. we'd be happy to set up any individual conversations with people to explore that further. But in general, when you look at the solutions that Magnet Forensics offers, we really cover 4 areas: data collection, artifact identification, data structuring and analytics, and then reporting. So we believe across this workflow that we have to distribute this digital evidence across a wider workforce, not just in the lab of experts that are doing the work. So that could be, frontline police officers, or as I mentioned earlier, it could be those other stakeholders within a private sector organization. To do that, it's incredibly important that we leverage technology, training, and the personnel that exist inside the agency or organization. And when I speak of technology, I believe that we need to empower the users with very simple and intuitive tools that take the rudimentary out of the hands of the lab. And that's what we strive to do every day. In the lab itself, for those experts that are doing the work with the cases, we can make it a factory, essentially, by leveraging automation and AI technologies to streamline the work that those folks do. And then across the broader organization, we need to leverage platform technologies to enable collaboration and digital evidence review. And with that, I hope that was a short but thorough overview of Magnet and a little bit about who we are and what we do. And from here, I'm going to bid all of you adieu and say thanks again for your time, and we'll pass it over to Carl.
Thanks, Chris. Excuse me. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction and welcome everyone. I just wanted to continue in the same vein from some of Chris's thoughts, really talking about how specific features within digital forensics really impact the value of your investigations within incident response. And we have some useful information from our customers and some case studies. And on the next slide, you'll see that the first one is a large US energy and defense corporation who are using Axiom Cyber. They have offices worldwide. And for them, one of the key features within digital forensics is the timeline feature. So Chris mentioned all that data tsunami. When you are recovering data from many different devices, it is very, very difficult to begin an analysis of that data when you have millions of items. And one of the key things within an incident response investigation is having an effective timeline. So looking at specific times and dates, looking at when an incident occurred and saying, please show me all of the data 1 hour before or 1 hour after that incident. And for this particular company in the US, they thought timeline gave them a really useful indication of what happened within the malware infection. And that was used alongside some of their other cybersecurity software solutions to really provide an accurate reflection of what happened in that incident. Our second customer in the UK, a friend of ours, George, who provided some information on a few of his cases. If you could, and IT group were looking through a number of different corporate investigations. And George talked about the artifact first approach and how digital forensics tools, in particular Axiom Cyber, can focus on key data, but present that data in a very structured manner. So you're not having to look through hex and text, and you're not having to look through file system. It can present the data in a way that most people can see from a very user-friendly interface. And it allows for quick filtering. It allows searching in a very efficient manner. And some of the specific artifacts that George talked about on the next slide, you'll see that are very effective within incident response type investigations. So for example, RDP, you can look at when people are leveraging RDP to move through a network. For example, if they're using specific credentials to log on, and you can access that, and you'll see through that just that small window there that, and I know Reese will look into this in more detail, but you can see that you can actually specifically look at RDP results, and it gives you a really good idea of the indicators when someone is moving through a network, for example, a malicious attack. In addition to that, an evidence of time stamping, so when timestamps or files are altered, you can look through the data, maybe look at that within a timeline and see all of the different files and when they were altered and how that impacts on the investigation. And finally, quite an obvious one in IR type cases is email. We have a very effective email viewer where you can look at connections, where emails came from, where they were sent to, how they were delivered to the inbox and the origin of them. And of course, with malicious attacks, that's very, very important. One other item I wanted to mention on this particular area that's not something that came up during this investigation, but is very, very important in IR cases is memory analysis. We work together with tools like Volatility, Come, which are excellent memory analysis tools. And we provide that embedded within Axiom Cyber so that it gives you a very good indication of the memory files, and they can be very, very important in incident response type cases. Finally, before I hand over to Reese, I did want to mention that one of the most positive pieces of feedback we've been receiving lately is the digital forensic remote acquisition that we provide. And for many of you out there that have used remote acquisition tools in the past, you'll know that the agents are normally deployed, and that can cause several issues. The one thing that's been very positively received within cyber is the ad hoc agent. So only deploying the agent as and when required. And that agent will then talk back to the administrator or examiner who can recover specific targeted data, recover all data from a machine or data from targeted locations. So it's really important that we have a bespoke, customizable, flexible agent that recovers data that can be applicable within that particular case. So you can select and download individual partitions, complete drives, targeted data, and you can acquire drives, process memory, and also memory from encrypted drives. So really important when you're recovering the data. Before we get to the feature set, with the timeline and the RDP and all of the artifacts and email listed, it's important that we recover that data in the right manner. And we certainly can help with that. And I know that many digital forensic tools can assist within the cybersecurity investigation. Okay, I'll pass over to Reese, who will look straight into the product. Thanks, Reese.
Thanks very much, Carl, and welcome everyone. So today I wanted to go through how we can utilize Axiom Cyber and just follow how we can gain a sequence of events based on some of the digital forensic artifacts that we see during an incident. I'm going to show you Axiom Cyber, and there's two elements to Axiom Cyber here. Is you have the process element and the examine element. The process side allows us to navigate through in terms of selecting what data that we want to carve out of a device that we may have on a particular incident, or maybe internal investigations as well. Both Carl and Chris mentioned different methods and use cases in how our tool is utilized today. And quite often when I speak to customers, and the same with the team as well, we often get some similar questions, and they come along the lines of, am I prepared to quickly investigate a security event? Can I easily acquire and analyze evidence from multiple different locations, cloud and endpoint actions as well? And this really shows us how important a tool like cyber can be as well, because we talk about those remote endpoints. People are working differently in this day and age, whether we're working from an office environment, people working across the globe at home and in different offices as well, and how reliable and flexible are our tools today. And basically, are we setting ourselves up for potentially insider or outsider threats as well? So I'm going to walk you through how we start an investigation, how we sort of process, maybe capture some of that material in that remote acquisition. And I'm going to dive into the examine features as well and show how some of our artifact first tool, artifact first views will assist in that process, but also things like timeline and connections as well. Some great features that we can have that really assist you when doing these types of investigations. So I'm going to scroll down straight away to the evidence sources in here, and we can see instantly within Axiom Cyber, we can ingest computer, mobile, cloud, vehicle, and remote acquisition as well. So I'm just going to ingest some computer data. You can see different types of operating systems that we can ingest. So whether it's Windows, Mac, Linux, or even Chromebook acquisitions, we have that possibility and that wide range of material that we can ingest into these sources as well. Now, one thing I will say is we have multiple items that we have within our investigations today. So you might have a Mac and a Windows in one investigation, add them in to a tool like Axiom Cyber. That really allows us to look at the data across multiple operating systems as well. Now, you can see you have the opportunity to acquire devices. So different occasions might allow us to acquire devices physically because maybe we've turned them off from our network, we physically got them. So again, we can do remote acquisitions or physical as well if we have hold of that disk item. So different ways. And again, different ways we can ingest that data, whether we're taking in a drive, image, maybe targeted locations like certain files and folders that were ingested in, volume shadow copies, and Carl mentioned as well things like volatility and COME that we have ingested into our solutions today with that memory analysis. So I'm just going to load in a hard drive, an E01 image that I've previously acquired. And again, there's so many different formats that we can ingest when we're looking to pull that data into Axiom Cyber. I'm going to leave everything selected, but again, you can navigate through the petitions that you have. Maybe you're looking to carve and scan specific areas. Absolutely fine. You can narrow that down throughout your investigation, but I'm going to leave it as full today. And again, different types of searches that you might want to carve against, quick, sector level, or even that custom. Maybe that unallocated space isn't important in the type of investigation you're doing. Maybe you want to remove that. So leave it as full. I add that hard drive into my investigation. Now you can see inside of here, we have mobile, we have options for cloud as well. And cloud is really important when we talk about how we capture and pull back some of that data. When we look to acquire that evidence in here, and again, especially in incidents, maybe we're looking into AWS, whether it's EC2 instances, S3 buckets, being able to do those collections and have that tool that's flexible and allows us to pull that data back into our product using some of the API hooks that we have in here today. Again, Azure is ingested in that with Microsoft Teams, and again, with Microsoft Office 365 and using those Microsoft credentials again. Maybe there's insider threats, things like audit logs that we want to pull back and ingest into our investigations. Loads of different options that we have when we talk about cloud. And cloud is also very important as well when we talk about mobile investigations. Are we looking to pull data in? Maybe there's that insider threat from mobile. Can we pull that data in? And yes, we can. We can acquire from things like Android, iOS, Windows phones, and multiple different options inside there as well. Let's jump into that remote acquisition because I want to highlight that process that Carl just mentioned there about how we can utilize things like that ad hoc agent. So inside here, I can create a new agent, or if I go back, you can see we have the option to select multiple endpoints. So I've got some endpoints here. I've got one that we'll turn online in just a moment. But I'm going to start off by creating a new agent. Now, for the purpose of the demo, I've got the agents just stored in a desktop location. And again, you can call this agent whatever you like. So I'm just going to call it test123. And again, I'll call the agent, we'll call it just 123.agent. So we got the agent ID and the agent file in there as well. when we're looking to collect from different operating systems, we can do Windows, Mac, or Linux. So we have multiple different areas in terms of what we can collect. And I showed you on that previous screen where we can select multiple endpoints that we look to acquire from. Again, we can queue up to 15 within Axiom Cyber today. And again, even if you want to go further than that and do multi-endpoint investigations, there are different tools that we can allow to within our product suite to pull multiple and further endpoints in. Now, when we talk about Windows and Linux, we can do full physical acquisitions. Mac, we're looking down to logical only. And the reason for that is we want to avoid that T2 disk encryption. But you'll notice if we do select Windows or change it to Mac, basically the only thing that changes is that exe gets dropped off. So we have that ability to be able to push out in a very similar process. And during some of those slides, we discussed how simple we want to make Axiom Cyber for that end investigator and make some of these investigations much easier to pull that data back as well. We can show more details. I'll leave that blank so we can give that agent's exe file some metadata, but I'll leave that blank for the purpose of this demonstration. But some real great features that we've got ingested into the tool as well. So we can survive a shutdown when we're looking at our endpoints. And when I talk about surviving a shutdown, if a laptop goes offline and we've started collecting data, our agent can basically carry on from where it's left off. So I often refer to our agent, for example, if those of you have heard of the film E.T., the way it works is it talks back home, it phones home. So we're not asking to reach out. So if that agent goes offline and then comes back online, we're able to connect to that agent and basically carry on from where it's left off. So if we download chunk 1, 2, and 3, we lose that connection. When it's reestablished, we can carry on from chunk 4, 5, 6, and so on. If we lose that connection completely and we can't get that connection back, maybe that laptop, that device never comes back online, we've still got chunk 1, 2, and 3. We can examine and review that data, which again really gives us that flexibility in that agent that we push out, and it can be done on that ad hoc process. So I'm just going to type in an IP address in here, and this is important to understand when we start talking about the remote collection. Is there's two different ways in how we deploy the agent. We can use Axiom Cyber to push that agent out for us. Now, if you're using Axiom Cyber, there are some methods that we need to follow, and that we need to be on the same network, or we physically need to be connected to a VPN. Now, don't worry if you're not on those options. There are other ways, and a lot of our customers go down this other route of using that EDR solution. We understand when we talk about incidents, digital forensics, and our endpoints, that we need multiple tools to be able to collect that. And so the use of multiple tools really helps us in our IR investigations. So we can use when I was talking about using an EDR solution, this IP address isn't the IP address of the endpoint that I'm looking to collect, but actually the IP address of where I've got Axiom Cyber installed. So I might have this in an AWS or an Azure environment with that static IP address to talk back to. Now, I'm going to give it a port number. So I'm going to say port 4321 in this scenario. I know that port 4321 is not being used, and we're going to push data across that port. It is encrypted during that transit process as well. We have other settings in here, like being able to reconnect delay, or we have that disconnect keep alive in terms of when we want that agent to disappear. And also we can connect back to Axiom process using different proxy settings as well. So if you have proxies on the network, there's different ways in how we can tackle and combat that. We got that auto detect proxy settings, and we can also manually select our proxy network as well. Now, when I create this agent, you'll see it'll create that in that folder that I originally requested it to, and we can either now deploy or connect to that agent. If I deploy that agent using Cyber, like I mentioned, I need to be on that same VPN or connected physically to that endpoint. This is the only time where you'll need the IP address of the endpoint, but if you're using an EDR solution, again, you won't need to go through this process. Obviously, we're pushing an executable file out, so you are going to need those admin privileges, and also in terms of where you want to push that particular agent. If you want to put it on the root of the C drive, maybe you want to hide this from the end user. You want to bury that within the Windows system agent, Windows system. And I mentioned earlier about we can call the agent whatever we like. Maybe we want to hide it from the user, make it more covert. Let's change the naming convention of that file as well. So I'm just going to go back and I'm going to connect to an endpoint that I've already deployed the agent to, already pushed it out using an EDR solution. We can see it's online here. And I'm going to ask it to connect to that agent. You can see while it's making that attempt, currently we're not connected. So what we're getting is the targeted locations. When it goes green and we get that connection, we can then further establish, you can see that's coming online now. We can go to the files and drives and do memory acquisition here as well. So in terms of that targeted location, we can, if there are areas that we consistently collect from, whether it's logs, particular Windows artifacts in here, user documents, etc., you can target that and even create profiles of areas and manage those profiles of particular areas that you always capture from. When we look at the files and drives, we have opportunities to go in and navigate around that file and folder system. So I can navigate through my particular C drive, for example, that I've got connected. I'm going to go into a user account, and let's go into the desktop, and I'm just going to select something that I've got inside here. So I'm just going to select an image for the time being. Once we capture that, it's already, if I've selected multiple documents or material or logs to come back, that will start collecting. You can see if I lose a collection in here, I've already made that download. It's already started capturing that data, so I can review it. So if it gets halfway through my process, what we've captured, we already have that availability to review that data as well. Our container is stored in an AFF4L container. It's an open source container. This can also be changed to a zip format, and everything will be hashed when it comes back as well. Going back into the drives, you do have the opportunity to navigate to the drives and anything that's connected and do full physical. And you also have the opportunity to compress that data before you start downloading as well. Going back one stage to the memory now, we can also do individual processes or full memory acquisition. So when we're connected to that endpoint, we have the ability to see what's happening, especially in that incident. Maybe something's being run currently, you want to collect that data, or maybe there's that internal investigation going on inside there as well. I've selected everything that I want to capture in this scenario. I'm going to ask it to go ahead and capture it. I now have the ability to say I want to delete or keep that agent. So maybe I want to go back, do a further acquisition later on. You can see it's now started archiving, hashing, checking the RAM and checking for any encryption as well. And we've added that AFF4 into our investigation. Can add multiple devices, as I've said earlier, inside of here. Now, as we go through, I'm just going to highlight some of the opportunities in here. We can calculate matching hash values. You have the ability to use optical character recognition in here. Loads of really useful material when we're looking at AI, and in particular here for Yara rules. If we're looking at IR incidents, we have Yara rules built in to our system. The dictionary is always updated, and again, you can add your new rule sets in here as well. So if you're looking to identify material that may be already malicious, containing some of that information, it's a great resource to start from here, and it'll point that out. And we'll show you through the demonstration of the product that I'm going to do today and how that can be useful as well. Now, if I go into the computer artifacts, we are an artifacts first approach, and there's lots of different ways in how we can collect that data. So if we're looking for communication, we've got that internal threat. You have opportunities to pull out individual items of communication and really focus that investigation. When we start talking about an IR incident, maybe we're pulling back data from memory. It's grayed out at the moment because I didn't add one into the source, but I do have one into the demonstration file that we're going to show. So lots of areas that we can collect from. I really like the hidden and terminated processes, for example. So lots of different options inside of there as well. Operating system, again, so whether we're using timestamp mismatches or different certain items that we can see inside of the operating system that will be useful, whether it's Mac or Windows inside of that analysis. Now let's jump over to the actual product, and I'm just going to highlight, in fact, I'm going to jump back to the dashboard first of all. So we're in the examined product within Axiom Cyber here, and if I just highlight this on the in the middle of the screen, you can see here I've got some RAM that I've previously captured and a Windows 10 device. So I'm going to go in and look at this particular data. We've got lots of useful information on the dashboard. We've got some artifact categories that we've already pulled out inside of here. And if I had any cloud insights, we would see the leads here as well. Now, different types of views that Carl mentioned in the slides in terms of how we can highlight and make our incident response investigation that much easier. We're an artifact first approach, so we're going to highlight all of those artifacts. We've got different views such as connections and email viewer, file system, media explorer, registry, and timeline as well. But I want to start off with that artifacts first approach, and I'm going to dive into this section in here. Now, the way we display our material, you've got all the different categories split out in an easy, readable manner down the left-hand side of the screen. So the two particular areas that I'm going to start on today is the operating system, but I also want to highlight as well the operating system and memory, the Yara rule matches too. So I want to see how we can follow a potential threat that's came in, whether it's internal or an external threat. I want to see how we can follow that in these particular areas, and then sort of dive into the Yara rules over here and actually see how that's already highlighted, but different ways in how we can follow some of those breadcrumbs as well. Now, if I go into the web related, you're seeing everything split out. So if somebody's downloaded something within Firefox or Chrome or Edge, everything's split out into those easy artifacts, and it's displayed in the middle with our evidence and the metadata down the right-hand side. But first of all, I'm going to start off in the memory, and I mentioned earlier about the hidden and terminated processes. So I'm going to dive straight into that, and it's going to show me all of that information. Now, we've got 85 artifacts inside of this hidden and terminated processes here. Now, as I scroll down and start reviewing some of this material, I can see that I've got a lot of SV host exe files. So I'm actually going to apply a filter on that column. Now, there are global filters at the top across all of my data, different ways in how we can filter, but I'm going to apply an individual filter inside of the column. And again, we can do a basic or an advanced filtering here. Now, I typed in SV host because I've gone through this investigation before, but I can say I want to include or exclude this particular item. Now, I had a lot of noise in terms of I've got 85 items. I want to maybe exclude some of that SV host. So I'm going to apply that search to exclude, and that will reduce the amount of data that we can see from 85 down to 47. And when we've got that filter on, we can see along the top of the screen, our filter's gone yellow, and it's really reduced our memory artifacts inside here as well. Now, as I scroll down and start reviewing some of this information, I came across earlier this history hash exe, which I really don't recognize and haven't seen before. And I want to do a little bit of digging into what this actually is. Staying inside that memory, we also have that malware finder as well within that artifact that's using things like Kome and volatility inside of Axiom Cyber here. And again, we're seeing more of that history hash ex being dropped into that particular area. So I think this history hacks ex is a really good place to start. So what I'm going to do now is clear my entire filters, because I've gathered some breadcrumbs from this area, and I'm going to search for that history hash. So inside of here, I'm just going to type in a global search, and that's really going to narrow all of my filters down. In fact, if I clear my filters back and go back to that original screen, you can see I've got almost 700,000 artifacts. So there's a lot of information inside here. I'll apply that history hash, and you can see now operating system artifacts, some really useful areas. And we're starting to build an understanding of potentially how a malicious file has got around our system and how it performs within our Windows environment. So you can see here I've got a startup item. So again, if a machine turns on and off, this history hash is going to start up every single time. We've also got auto runs, again, with that same history hash inside of there as well. So we're now starting to build that picture and story of how this file it works, and we'll later understand exactly what it does as well. Now, the NTFS timestamp mismatch is a really useful tool. Again, if something's started to change or create new data inside of here, we can see we've got a file name, created date. Now, this created date is based on the NTFS system. So we can see it's accurate here. It's in 2019. But what Windows is actually showing is this standard information created date. So when we're in that Windows environment and we see a file and we see that file created date, that's what's going to be displayed in 2003. Now, I know that's not accurate because my computer's not 16 years old here. So again, that's ringing alarm bells for me and allowing me to follow that history file even further. If I move on to that prefetch file as well, we're now seeing some new executable files in the prefetch files in terms of what's been executed. So that prefetch files is telling us what's been executed on that Windows system, and we've also got the application run count down here as well. So we can see this particular history hash, as I scroll down the right-hand side, has been run multiple times. In fact, 5 counts here with lots of different dates and times. And again, Carl mentioned different features in how we can use that. We've got timeline views where we can use a time range. So again, if we're looking at an incident, maybe I want to see everything that happened 2 minutes before and after this was executed. You apply that, it's going to take you to that timeline view, and we're going to see a load of usage inside of the browser in this particular scenario. Again, we might have some program executions, maybe some files doing stuff, and that's already applied our filter. So different ways in how we can navigate and sort of understand exactly how the timeline can assist us in this different scenario. The other one I did come across and noticed here, we got that executable file. And what I'm going to do is I also notice in the application path, it's underneath that history hash. So I'm just going to copy that file out, and I'm now going to clear my filters inside of the artifacts view here. And that will bring me back my 700,000, well, close to 700,000 artifacts that we had. And I'm just going to apply another filter within inside of that global search. You can see I've done it earlier. I've applied a filter before it stores that history and makes it very easy. And we can see now we've got that search. And if I go back to that log file analysis in here as an artifact, we can actually see there's been a rename of a file. So as I scroll down now and look at the metadata, you can see I've got the current file name, which again was that history hash, and it's now been it's been changed from this BP ITP to the history hash. So instantly, this is really ringing alarm bells. Looking at some of the artifacts here where we've notified malicious data within our system as well. Now let's clear those filters. And I mentioned earlier about the Yara rules. I've followed that through memory and looking through some of the artifact filters that show within the operating system. But if I scroll down the left panel here where we're receiving all our evidence items, and go to the Yara rules mismatch, it's actually already identified that history hash exe as a malicious file. So I could have navigated straight to this, but we've gone through the operating system, we've gone through the malware in terms of understanding how this file has operated. Now, I mentioned too earlier, we have things like the file system view. So maybe I want to jump over to the timestamp mismatch in this particular scenario, and we have that history hash. It's going to take us directly to that file. I clicked on a hyperlink, and it takes us to the file system view. I could have navigated straight to the file system view and looked for it, but some of the keys and the ways that we operate and move around inside of Axiom Cyber can really assist as well. Now, another great feature that we have within Cyber is the ability to check with VirusTotal. So I can run this particular search now, and I'll just bring my window across because it's on my other screen. And I've checked that with VirusTotal, and you can see there's a number of different places where this has previously been identified. So we have that VirusTotal built into that file system. We just simply right-click, check, and we can see this is a malicious hardware based on some of the Yara rules and also being able to dig around as well. Now, I just want to jump to one other example that I do have in this particular scenario, and it's down to an internal insider threat where we've got lots of material, whether it's Google, Office 365, Facebook, and a Windows 10 machine here as well. Now, in this particular scenario, I'm going to jump to the artifacts, and I'm just going to filter on the Office 365 data. Now, I'm looking for an internal threat, and what I want to do is show you how some of the features can be used from whether it's cloud, whether it's from just a PC, and how we can follow and track data across the system. Now, I'm looking for a particular file that's been stolen across a device. So again, whether it's that internal threat, whether we're looking at an incident response investigation, these features work in exactly the same way. And I'm going to apply, I'm just going to have a look at the audit logs. You can see inside of here, we have 478 audit logs that are going to be displayed. And I'm going to use that same filter that we used earlier. I'm going to filter on a column, but I'm going to keep this as a basic filter because I just want to see all the downloaded items that display inside of the audit log. So that should reduce our artifacts significantly. You can see I've got a red tag against one earlier. Just by tagging, I simply go in, right click. I can use shortcut keys. I can tag. Maybe I want to flag this up of interest as well. Now, looking at that metadata information on the right-hand side, you can see that this audit log relates to a spreadsheet. It's been downloaded, and I want to find out where it's gone. How has that happened? Now, we talked about earlier navigating into the timeline. We use that timeline view in terms of understanding what happened before and after a threat. Now I want to follow the connection as well. So next to here, we've got an icon which looks like a network diagram. This relates to our connections. So I'm going to select that connection diagram, and it's going to build out. It's like having an analyst sat on my shoulder. I can see everything that's happened with that spreadsheet. I can see that it's stored on a laptop. I can see it's stored within different cloud resources here. And again, we can highlight that, take that out to the next stage. You can see in this area, it's been stored on a SharePoint location. Who's had access to that? How has that file been handled in that environment? Now, on the right-hand side, we have a lot of matching results here. You can see I've got an email right at the start. And when I click on tags, I've got this particular email where we've come from. So we've come from an audit log to a spreadsheet to an email, and we can see that this spreadsheet is attached to that email. It says, hey, Cameron, is this the spreadsheet you're looking for? So again, we've got internal threats with IP where people are stealing different IP threats, where we can take that out using features like connections and make our investigations very simple. We have the ability of timelines, email views, as Carl mentioned earlier, and also that agent approach on an ad hoc basis that really gives us some reliability in being able to capture from our endpoints. There's so much material and different data that we can view with inside of Axiom Cyber here. It's such a great tool, but I want to hand back over to Carl and Daniel if we have anything further. I believe there might be a few questions that come in.
Yeah, thanks, Race. And appreciate the insight into that. We're more than happy to connect with anyone if you'd like to learn more about any of the solutions or learn more about any of the features that we've shown today. There is some good questions, Dan. If you don't mind, I'll take the first one, and then I'll let Reese look at the others, and happy to add some more information on the other questions as well. In terms of the Middle East military question, we don't name individual organizations that we work with, partly because of the end user license term agreements that we have with many of our customer base. What we can say is that we work with military, law enforcement, and corporate in many countries, over 100 countries worldwide. That does include the Middle East. And we have about 5,000 organizations worldwide that use our tools. If you would like anything more specific, then obviously I'm happy to work with you, understand the context of the question, and contact me directly, and happy to have a conversation or email exchange.
Cool. Thank you for that one. Yeah, Reese, if you want to take the other two questions, I can see a couple in the chat there, and I've got a few in the background that I've asked. So, do you want to take? Should we take the bottom one there? Does Axiom platform integrate with other systems to enhance overall resiliency? And just building on that, I did have a question around the ease of integration of this particular software with existing systems, because I imagine that's something that a lot of organizations would be considering when listening to a webinar like this. So if you could take that question, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, Axiom's fantastic. We got a lot of customers that do integrate our system with others. It very much is there to enhance the power in terms of understanding the threat that's come into a system. What IP data have we lost? How is that malware particularly operated around our system? So going forward, we can understand how an attacker has got into our system and how we can block that out from the future. It's not necessarily a tool that where we're looking to, we work alongside other tools. So we find that a lot of organizations will have SOC tools, for example, that highlights the threats. And then that's where Axiom Cyber comes in, is let's understand how those threats have happened and how they progressed through our systems. So yeah, absolutely, the integration is important. And we've got other solutions as well that I mentioned earlier, like our Automate Enterprise solution, where we can ingest multiple different tools into that to streamline that process when we talk about incident response and collection. So whether we're pulling tools, things like arsenals, reg rippers, Thors into a process and a workflow to be able to identify exactly what material that we want to process, and also do that in a standard and orchestrated approach as well.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. We speak to a ton of organizations globally about incident response and especially like the post-event forensics piece. And I had a follow-up question from that. And if an organization was watching this and they wanted to, say, demonstrate an ROI on a piece of technology or software like this, what would be the business value in using, for example, Magnet, rather than a sort of a third-party independent forensics team?
Carl, do you want to take that one or?
Yeah. So Dan, when you say third-party independent, do you mean forensic service providers?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, good question. We've the majority of our new customers on the corporate side that we sell to have been using consultancies, have been using forensic service providers, some of the large, consultancies out there, the big four that provide these type of services and advice. The majority of our new customers, as I said, have been doing that before and have decided to take that in-house simply because of that. This corresponds to the previous question, the integration with a lot of the other tools. We can ingest data from many different tools. For example, if you use a UFED for examining mobile devices, we can ingest that data. And they find that using Axiom, they can ingest data from multiple sources. And it's very simple and easy to navigate, very simple and easy to do the analysis, very easy to do the reporting. And because of that time efficiency, and because they're doing that investigation in-house, they find that, first of all, it saves them money. Secondly, it's more efficient and saves them time. And thirdly, it increases the knowledge levels within their organization on the digital forensic side. And many of the cyber investigators and analysts that are on the line now will probably be quite interested in some of that digital forensic features that they can utilize in the future.
No, thank you. It's a good answer. I think if you're bringing these sort of resources in-house, it's going to be far more cost effective, right? And it's clear from what I've seen, the visibility of the entire network is significantly improved. Just building on that, what I was kind of mentioning there in terms of visibility, I think one of the questions I can see, someone anonymously put this in. It says, how do we know if a malware attack is taking place without alerting the attackers? Do you have any sort of thoughts or perspectives on that?
For me, that one all depends on the scenario and the type of attack it is. Sometimes you might want to take that endpoint offline as quickly as possible so it doesn't spread. There might be other occasions where you're trying to understand how that malware is behaved within your system. It very much depends on the threat that is in place as well. And for me, that probably leads on to the flexibility within the tool in terms of how we collect that data, whether we want to use something like our remote acquisition feature to be able to collect that there and then, or maybe we're taking that offline and we're going to acquire that and load in that physical image. So for me, it very much depends on how that attack is coming in. But if we're using the remote agent, like I said, we can do it in a covert or an overt manner. Now, nothing is truly 100% covert, hence why we probably found that something a bit of malware has come in as well. It works on both sides. So it's down to the tactics that we use to be able to identify that, and that feature with the remote acquisition really allows us to do that, and hide that and bury that within the system as well.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Look, I can't see any more open questions on the chat here, but I think we've been going for about 55 minutes now, so I think it's been fairly comprehensive in terms of the overview, and I've really enjoyed it myself. So I really hope the attendees have enjoyed listening. Just to summarize, thank you so much to you both, and to Chris as well, who I think had to jump off, but yeah, really appreciate your time and the overviews of both the products and the challenges that many organizations are facing. And anyone on the line, please do explore the website, Magnet's website. There's a lot of interesting content on there, or feel free to reach out to the gents on the call today. So Carl, Reese, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to everyone listening, and hope to see you all again very soon.